it's great to join with you for devotions today. It's a good day. The Lord, His mercies, the Bible tells us, are new every morning. He is a faithful God, and there is so much to be grateful for. Well, today we're looking at the book of Numbers, chapter 11. And you'll find that as you turn to this particular chapter in the Bible, you'll see that God's people were complaining. It's so easy to complain, isn't it? When things change and when things become uncertain, we tend to default to complaining because we're not comfortable anymore. The familiar has been removed and we don't particularly like it. But I was reminded that we need to be careful of our complaints. And I was reminded of this very early in my walk with the Lord when I came before Him in my prayers, complaining, full of complaints about a particular leader. And the Lord spoke to me very concisely and very directly in my prayers as He directed me to Psalm 105 verse 15, which says this: "Do not touch my anointed ones, do my prophets no harm." You know, when God spoke these words to me, I knew I'd crossed a line with Him I shouldn't have crossed. And immediately I repented, and in His mercy He walked with me through that situation. He enabled me to see that this leader had a heart for Him, and this leader was doing everything he could to ensure that the Lord's will was done and carried out in our midst. And so I committed myself to supporting this leader and not taking complaints to the Lord about him anymore. We need to be careful. I was reminded then just to be careful about what I'm complaining about. And in Numbers chapter 11 verse 1, we find the Lord had heard the people complaining, and in verse 1 it says His anger was aroused against them, so much so that a fire broke out on the outskirts of the camp. Well, if ever there was a sign from God, that was it. But did they catch on? No, they didn't catch on. We read later on in this particular chapter that the complaints didn't stop. Someone mentioned in the camp that they would like meat instead of this manna that the Lord had been providing for them day after day. And then other people started to saying, "Oh, if only we were back in Egypt, back in the good old days when we could have as much onion and as much garlic as we liked and as we loved." And they didn't even appreciate or even acknowledge the provision God had been making for them in the here and in the now. Instead, their focus was back on how the good old days, how things used to be back in Egypt. Well, their complaining reached the Lord's ears again, and in verse 10, this time the Lord becomes exceedingly angry with them. So much so that He decides He will give them what they want. Up to this point, they'd been receiving what they needed, but now it wasn't to their standard anymore. "God, this isn't good enough," they were saying. They weren't saying it with their lips, but they were certainly saying it with their behaviour and with their complaints. "God, what you've been doing for us isn't good enough. We want better than this." And so God, in His mercy, and we know He is a merciful God. Lamentations chapter 3 verse 22 and 23 reminds us just how merciful God is towards us. "Because of the Lord's great love," it says, "we are not consumed, for His compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness, O Lord." And we see there that, God, with these Israelites, He could have wiped them off. He could have sent an opposing army to deal with them and get their attention. He could have even told them, "Pack your bags and get back to Egypt and go back to the way things used to be. Go and have your fill of it." But God doesn't do this. Instead, He gives them what they want. And it reminds us, be careful what we ask for, because we might just get it. God says, "I will give you your meat, and not only will I give you your meat, you will get so much of it, it will start to come out your nose and it will make you sick." Wow, that does not sound pleasant at all. We can be so certain at times about what we think we need. We can be so certain at times about what we think should happen, but we need to be careful that we don't start thinking that we know better than the Lord. We should be careful that we don't offend Him by beginning to spurn His provision in our lives. In these days of uncertainty, and friends, as we go from day to day, these times seem to be growing more uncertain with each passing day. Let's be found trusting in the Lord. Let's be found with thankful hearts for His provision in the here and now. Let's be found thankful for the new thing He is doing in our midst, knowing and believing that He's going to supply, and He's going to do it in His way. He's going to do it in a way that we need, not necessarily in the way that we want, but He will do it in the way that we need. The Lord will direct the way, and the Lord will establish His good will among His people as we trust in Him. I don't know about you, but when I complain, I find that it brings my spirit down, and I begin to have a negative outlook on all sorts of things, not just on the thing that I'm upset about, but I start to view other things negatively. My mindset begins to alter. My attitude starts to take a dive. This is why we need to be careful about our complaints, because if we're not careful, like the Israelites, we might just find ourselves coming against the Lord our God Himself. Friends, in these days, let me encourage you to ask the Lord to give you eyes to see the thing He is doing in our midst. Ask the Lord to give you eyes to see His provision today. And as we do that, I know that He will hear you, and He will answer your prayers, and He will be merciful to you, just as He was merciful to me when I was complaining and I was coming up against Him myself. He showed me so much mercy. He will show you so much mercy too. God bless you. God keep you. Keep pressing into Him in these days. See you next time. Bye.